Hello, this is Bunny, and I am going to be talking about toxic friends. Well, I'm going to be talking about one particular person that's been very toxic to me. I would say a toxic friend is very much like a person who just feels like it's being around poison when you're around them. And I felt like that with this person a lot of the times, more than I have liked to admit in the past. And I feel that expressing this will help me. And I have realized that in order to love myself, I can't allow myself to have relationships with such people. I knew this girl since I was about 10 years old, but I didn't really start talking to her until I was about 11, and we were pretty much together until I was 15, and we fell out of touch and we got back together when I was 20. I am 25 now, recently married, and I have made it clear to her, at least I believe I have made it clear to her, that I want nothing to do with her anymore. Flashback, I was 11 years old and I was studying in the Philippines, and I was constantly being bullied by people. And Faye was the exception. Most people didn't talk to me because they would get shamed for talking to me, and people wanted to fit in, so they didn't normally talk to me. And because she was the only one that would, I felt like at the time, I didn't have much of a choice. There was an incident where we had a Christmas party, and in those types of things, students bring food and exchange presents, and I didn't do any of that. I just showed up because you had to, and Faye was craving donuts, and she was begging me to buy donuts for the class, and I kept telling her no, because I didn't have money, and I didn't want to give people who were mean to me donuts, and she just kept insisting, and I kept saying no, and then she just says, "You bitch, no wonder everybody hates you." And I just felt very hurt, and I felt like stabbed emotionally, and I was very upset with that. I couldn't say anything. I just stood up and walked away. And later that night, I met her in the Christmas party, and she was just acting like she didn't say anything that was completely rude to me earlier. There used to be, or I believe it's still being published, a magazine for children called K-Zone, which has news about anime, cartoons, video games, and I really like that. And when I was younger, I would buy that. I believe it was a monthly series, and Faye would read it as well, and because I would have it. And one time she borrowed it, and she read it during class, and the teacher confiscated it, and she just turned to me, laughed, and said, "You can buy another one anyway." And the fact that, yes, I could buy another one wasn't the point. The fact is how she was just so careless about something that was lent to her, and her attitude really turned me off. There was a time she saw the magazine being sold in school, and she was saying to me, hey, are you going to buy that? And I said, eventually. I meant to say, not now, but I did say eventually. But she just grabbed it from the stand, ripped off the plastic, went to a table and started reading it, and then she looks at me and she's like, "Aren't you going to pay for it?" And I felt like at the time I didn't have a choice, so I did. And I went up to her and was like, "Why don't you ever buy these magazines for yourself? And she said, they're a waste of money. And then she looks at me as if expecting me to say something, but I just held my tongue, and I wish I could have said something or done something, but I just didn't have a spine back then. There was another very similar incident when we went to watch a movie, and it was somebody else's idea, but she was really for it. And when we were in line, when it was our turn, she turns to me and says, "Hey, I need to save money. Can you pay for me?" And I said, "No, I don't have money," because I only had enough money to pay for the movie and to go home, but she kept begging me to, because she really wanted this PC game, and I felt like I was on the spot again, and I'm not really good. I don't really react well when I'm on the spot, so I reluctantly paid for her because a ticket person was waiting for us, and she never bought her PC game in the end. And when I confronted her about it a few months later, she said, "I spent my money on something else." And I was like, "That's really annoying, because I spent money on you and for a PC game that you were supposed to buy, but you didn't." And she was like, "Geez, what's the big deal? I'm sorry." Really not sincere and very bitchy about it. And she kept insisting that I was rich because my family was working in the United States, and I had to explain to her, just because somebody is from a certain country doesn't mean they're rich. There are rich people, and there are poor people, and there are middle-class people, but her beliefs were, "I'm right, you're wrong," because of my ignorance. She punched a boy one time in the middle of a crowded hallway. Lots of witnesses. I was with her, so we both got in trouble. And a week later, she just goes, "Are you a bad influence?" And I'm just like, "What?" And she said, "Well, my mom said you're a bad influence." And I said, "You're the one who hit Tommy, and it was your idea, and I didn't tell you to do it, and you did it." And she's like, "Yeah, but my mom says you're a bad influence, though." And I was just like, "What?" And I understand that's her way to remove responsibility towards herself, and it really pisses me off when people don't take accountability for their actions. There was a time at the end of the first school year where the class wanted a beach party, and I didn't want to go anyway, but one of our classmates who was a friend of Faye's wanted to go, and she kept insisting that she hung out with her instead, and said things like, "Oh, come on, everybody's going to make fun of XN, me, in a bathing suit anyway. Like, who would want to see that? Everyone would laugh. So let's spare her the embarrassment, and let's do something else with her." And it was like, and I saw her leering at me from the corner of her eyes, and because I was right next to her when she said it, and I was like, wow. Even though she was a very close friend of mine, I didn't really like her too relaxed attitude towards me. Whenever I would bring manga to school, it would be for sharing, but she would grab it and go to the corner and read it herself and not even ask me. And I guess she felt at the time she didn't need it to ask me, and I just didn't like that sort of attitude. And there was a time when she followed me home from school when I told her to leave me alone. This is more of an annoying thing, but she told me a spoiler from a Harry Potter book. She would read like chapters ahead of me. She would skip them and like read ahead. And then one day she just comes up to me and is like, blah, blah, blah. And Draco was crying, and then in the fakest acting ever, she puts her hand over her mouth and like, oh, I didn't mean to tell you. Oh, I can't believe it. And the way I'm acting now was better acting than what she was doing. And I was so pissed off. I stopped reading the book because I thought she was gonna just spoil everything for me anyway. There were multiple occasions where she would put her hand in between my legs on my ass or pull up my skirt. We had no choice. We had to wear skirts to school, and I never liked that, and she would always thought that was really funny and hilarious. There was one time when I was like carrying food and our seat was like all the way across in the other side of the building, and I was like walking and she was following me with her hand on my ass and like stroking in between my legs and laughing, and I kept asking her to stop, and she was just touching me really inappropriately, and she could feel the menstrual pad I was wearing at the time, and she was like, ooh, what's this, what's this, what's this, and it was so gross. There was also a time when I was bent over a chair and I was reading something or either talking to somebody or looking out the window, something like that, and when I turned around, she was there. She was lifting my skirt with her leg, and she was like doing like this, looking down underneath, and like her tongue was out like this, and then there was like 3 boys behind her sitting on a desk, and I was like, Faye, and she said, oh, they saw you and they were commenting how disgusting your legs were, and I was just so torn at that point, and she's a horrible person. There was an incident where she broke her arm and had to wear a cast for a month, and the first day she had her cast on, I accidentally brushed up against her. She screamed. I turned around, saw what I had done. I apologized profusely, and she stomps on my foot as hard as she can, calls me a bitch, and at that moment, all those horrible things she did up until that point, like, flooded my mind, and I was, like, so full of anger. Like, she actually, that was the same day she lifted up my skirt in front of the boys, and she's been doing that and touching me inappropriately and treating me horribly and using me, and then I accidentally brushed up against her and she reacts like that towards me. So this video is a lot longer than I intended it to be. I will make this a 2-parter. I'll see you in the next part, and thank you for listening so far. This has been Bunny.